Now, I would request S.Gurumurthy to share his views on the topic how a media person should be.
In fact, when I look back and find out how I became a journalist, I became a journalist by accident. In fact, many things in my life were accidents, but I appropriated them as my successes. When we thought of probing into industrial corruption, for the first time we were trying to identify the corrupter. We always try to identify the corrupt. But somebody bribes, and then only the person who accepts the bribe, he comes into the limelight. So, that means studying balance sheets, looking into figures, and that involves the skill of a chartered accountant. That's how I came into the picture, that I was supposed to get the material ready so that some journalists could write about it. But we found ultimately no journalists were interested in writing because he said it's all a boring subject. Who will read this subject? Even if you have all this material, you must have readers to read it. And nobody is going to read these things. And no journalist in Indian Express was willing to write on this subject. Then Ramnath Goenka and me sat and discussed this matter. And he told me, Guru, there is no option. You have to become a journalist yourself. That's how I became a journalist. You know, the chartered accountants are always specialists in writing what should be written in 100 words, in 1000 words. Because the size of the document determines the fees that the client will pay. So naturally, we were all used to drafting long documents. But now I am given the responsibility to do the reverse. I have to draft something which I could draft only in 1000 words, in 50 words. So I had to completely exorcise myself, bring about a revolutionary change in me, change my vocabulary, and recouple my sentences, and then that's how I became a writer. But contrary to the expectations of all the journalists, the first 3 articles transformed the whole atmosphere in the country. Because the people wanted it, the journalists did not know about it. You know, what started in March 1986, by the end of 1986, that became the national talk. It means that the media, the journalists were unaware of what the people were thinking. And when you clicked with what the people were thinking and not what the people were wanting, most people do not know what they want. And today the media is intending to give what the people want, what the people need. And you decide this is what the people need. This is what some Rakhi is what the people need. Maybe they are needing something else. And if you have that something else, you can set an agenda for the nation. I'll just take you to 1983 when the Prime Minister of India then at that time, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she said, when somebody asked her a question about corruption, that corruption is a global phenomenon, we cannot do anything about it. In fact, one of the judges of the Delhi High Court wrote a judgment in which he said, when the topmost person in the country rationalizes corruption like this, how can you stop corruption in this country? I don't think corruption could ever become an issue in this country. That was what the people were thinking, the media was thinking at that time. But in 1986, when we started the campaign against corruption, against both the briber and the corrupt, it became an issue in 1987. And in 1989, it completely swept out of power the most powerful Prime Minister ever with 404 members in Parliament. That means the people were willing, but you had your assumption that this is not a subject which the people will like, because corruption is now a global phenomenon. The Prime Minister of India herself has said this. That means there is such a divergence between our assessment of the people and what the people are really. Now, most of the assessment about the people is based on the current media trends, the TRP trends about which Umesh Upadhyaya explained so beautifully. In fact, he set a lot of my mind thinking with a lot of questions. It only takes one newspaper to correct all the newspapers. It only takes one TV channel to correct all the TV channels. It takes one journalist to correct all the journalists. I will tell you my experience. Ramnath Goenka, with whom I worked, I was his advisor. In fact, I was 27 when he was 72 when I became his advisor. In fact, it used to be a joke at that time. So, we decided that the Indian Express will be the newspaper of newspapers. It will be the talk of the town. We will come out with that news, that undeniably factual news, that shocking news, no excitement, no falsity, no quibbling with words, straight attack on the corrupt, on the topmost. Indian Express accounted for 2 prime ministers and several chief ministers. Every expose of the Indian Express used to see a chief minister out, a minister out, the prime minister being voted out. It is possible for one media to transform the scenario, to set the national agenda, but we need a proprietor who is patriotic, who is a nationalist, who is courageous, who is willing to risk his very newspaper for this change. We talked about the market. In the market, you generate money. And Umesh Upadhyaya said, unless you give these things, there won't be any demand for your channel. There won't be any advertisement. And so you will not be able to engage with journalists because you can't pay. It's all true. But it is also true that as there is a herd mentality among the people, the herd mentality can be reversed also. That's what happened in 1986. It is possible to reverse the herd mentality by producing an alternative. And the alternative is something which the present system, the present trend cannot produce. For example, the present trend today makes a world of difference. I'll tell you, now corruption is a very big issue in India. And the media played a very important role in the issue of corruption. But it did not pursue corruption. It did not pursue the corrupt. It made corruption a big issue. That means there is no leadership in the media which could say, yes, these are the 5 corrupt people in this country.